Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all 3 past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single card today.
Hey everyone, David Aragona here with another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. The major prep race out west this weekend is the Grade 1 Santa Anita Derby, another race offering 100 Kentucky Derby qualifying points to the winner, though this one with the asterisk that only awarding those 100 points if a Bob Baffert runner does not win this race, and as has been the conversation with a lot of these California preps run so far this season, Bob Baffert does have 2 runners in the Santa Anita Derby field, so it remains to be seen whether this race really does have serious implications on the Kentucky Derby next month. Those Bob Baffert trainees, as you can see here, do include the morning line favorite, the number 4 Imagination, who is installed at 8-5 on the morning line. The number 3 Stronghold is probably the best hope to get those 100 points among the rest. As far as the morning line goes, he's listed as the second choice at 5-2. It also has some points under his belt, having won the Sunland Derby in his prior start. This race has come up a little weak considering the Grade 1 status and compared to some of the other Derby preps that we've seen on other circuits so far this year, including other Derby preps run in California already. So we'll see whether this race actually does produce any legitimate Kentucky Derby starters, but it still turns into an interesting handicapping affair, especially if you can look past that favorite Imagination. Let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this race, because I think this adds intrigue to the Santa Anita Derby. It's one of those pace projectors where the entire field is pretty bunched up, and you see 3 horses towards the front end in a fast-paced situation. And when you look through this field and check out the prior running lines, it's really hard to know who's going to be setting the pacing here. The horses shown across the track on the front end on the pace projector are Imagination, Tudo, and EJW The Cup. Maybe they're in front, but even horses like Talo, the number 2, have shown speed on occasion. Windstock has led from gate to wire in both of his wins, so it would not be a surprise if Bob Baffert instructs Juan Hernandez to get very aggressive on that runner. And even the number 3, Stronghold, who is shown with the LP flag indicating that he has the highest late pace rating in the field, he's not exactly a closer. He's a horse that wants to be involved in the pace in the early going, so it just feels like one of those races where the jockeys are really going to have to play the break, and there could be a real contest in jockeying for position on the front end heading into that clubhouse turn. And we'll see who ultimately works out the right trip given that murky pace situation in the Santa Anita Derby. Let's go through this field in post-position order, beginning with a long shot, the number 1 Cin Chaos. He's coming out of that Sunland Derby won by Stronghold and was just no match for that rival on that occasion. Got a pretty good trip, saving ground much of the way, and just really didn't have much answer through the stretch. He's simply going to have to get faster. That was his only dirt route attempt. He had previously won going long on the turf. Maybe that's his preferred surface. He's just going to have to run a lot better against what is the toughest field he's ever encountered in the Santa Anita Derby. The number 2 is Talo, and we'll take a look at his most recent start when he was a good second in the El Camino Real Derby. And the form of this race has since been flattered, not just by the winner of this race, Endlessly, who came back to win the Jeff Ruby Stakes very impressively by 4 lengths with a strong speed figure, but also the third-place finisher, guy named Joe, who came back with a good effort in a turf stakes race next time out at Santa Anita, improving his speed figure significantly from what he got in this El Camino Real Derby. So it feels like Talo is a horse who is heading in the right direction, and you could argue he ran one of the best races of anybody in that El Camino Real Derby, because you see those red color-coded pace figures indicating a fast pace, and he made an early, arguably premature move into that fast pace, taking the lead before the half-mile pole, leading around the far turn before just getting run down by the proven Endlessly at the end of that race. He had been taking steps forward in his prior starts on the dirt. He's not one of these synthetic horses switching back to the dirt who's unproven on this surface. He has good dirt form and actually was competitive with today's favorite, Imagination, when he raced against Maiden's 3-back going the mile distance. So Talo does have credentials, and he could be a fair price in this Santa Anita Derby. The number 3 is Stronghold, and we'll take a look at his most recent start when he won the Sunland Park Derby, a Grade 3 event run earlier in this season than it has been in recent Kentucky Derby prep seasons, and he just wasn't facing much of a field this day. Did run a respectable 1:11 TimeformUS speed figure. That's about in line with what others have run in this race or topped out at outside of Imagination, who we'll get to in just a little bit. Stronghold, he's been steadily improving. He ran pretty well two-back against Windstock, was a little keyed in the early stages of that race and battled on Gamely before just getting outdueled to the wire by that foe. He's one who's going to have to prove himself from a quality standpoint because competed against the best in Southern California. He's proven maybe a cut below up until this point. But like I said, the Santa Anita Derby field did not come up as tough as it could have. Some of the top runners in the Bob Baffert barn, like Nisos, are not participating in this race, so it might be an opportunity for a horse like Stronghold to pick up some needed Kentucky Derby qualifying points. The number 4 is Imagination, that Bob Baffert trainee who is likely to be the favorite in this race. We'll take a look at his most recent start when he won the Grade 2 San Felipe, the local prep for this, just gutting out this victory by a head over his Bob Baffert trained stablemate Wind Me Up, finishing well ahead of the other two rivals that they faced in here. Now, this was a race where the Bob Baffert uncoupled duo sort of dominated this race, also from a trip standpoint, not just from a result standpoint, because they got much better trips than the other two in this race, sort of causing some problems, not really fouling the other two, but the other two rivals in this race, including McVey, did have some trips heading into that clubhouse turn behind Imagination and Wind Me Up. So those two really had all the best of it from the front end. The race got a giant speed figure, 117, one of the fastest Derby preps that we've seen so far. It's a big improvement for both of these Bob Baffert horses. I'm kind of looking for some validation for that number from Imagination in this race, and you're gonna have to swallow a pretty short price finding out if that's a true speed figure. Last time out, not to say he hadn't run well in previous starts. He had shown ability, but he's shown himself to be a horse that does have some hang in him. He just barely gutted out that victory last time, was waiting on foes 2 and 4 back when not getting the job done in both races against May Moon and that maiden event against Better Than Gold. So don't totally trust Imagination at a short price in this race, and we'll see how short a price he ultimately turns out to be going out for this dangerous Bob Baffert stable. The other Baffert runner in the Santa Anita Derby field is the number 5 Windstock, and he was a big disappointment in his last start when he checked in 11th and last in the Southwest Stakes at Oaklawn Park. Previous to that, he had won 2 in a row, both at big prices, 13-1, was a winner of the Los Alamitos Futurity by a half length over today's rival Stronghold, and ran well that day, battling back outside that foe to get the job done. But note that both of his horses' victories have been earned on the front end, settling moderate paces. It remains to be seen if he'll even be fast enough to get to the lead in the Santa Anita Derby, because like I said, discussing that pace projector, there is plenty of speed in this race, and it's really going to be a rider's race to see who is most aggressive heading into that clubhouse turn. And I just question in general whether Windstock really has the upside to win this race, even if he gets his preferred trip. The number 6 is Tudo. We'll take a look at his most recent start when he broke his maiden in his 3rd career outing at Santa Anita, going the mile distance. This was his first time around 2 turns, and he handled the stretch out pretty well, drawing off to win this race over a couple of Bob Baffert-trained rivals by 2 1/4 lengths. And he had finished 3rd in his 2 prior starts, once against the very highly regarded May Moon, who initially was targeting this race, ended up opting out of this race, or Bob Baffert opted to skip this race with May Moon. So won't have to face that rival on this occasion, but he was also beaten by today's foe McVey, 2 back sprinting. Tudo's just gonna have to get a little bit faster. He ran a respectable 105 TimeformUS speed figure last time, but he's stepping up against tougher here, is stretching out an extra furlong. We'll see if that works for this horse. He's one that should be a square price in a wide open race, but I do think he has to improve a little bit. And the number 7 is McVey, and he ran pretty well against maidens 3 back when he was 2nd behind that highly regarded Bob Baffert runner May Moon. Then they stepped him up into a really tough spot in the Grade 3 Robert B. Lewis 2 back, was no match for Nisos, who at that point looked like the most talented 3-year-old of any that we had seen on the Kentucky Derby trail so far. Obviously, him not being eligible for the Kentucky Derby and since having gone to the sidelines, he is not in the Santa Anita Derby. McVey tried another stakes race, even though he was still a maiden last time out in that San Felipe, won by Imagination. He was one of the horses that did have significant trouble heading into the clubhouse turn, got a little keen, got steady, veered out, almost bolted into that clubhouse turn, went very wide at that point before ultimately settling down onto the backstretch. And that was just a merry-go-round race that was dominated on the front end. He really never had a chance to get back into it after that, but I still thought he finished up gamely through the stretch before Antonio Fresu just kind of stood up in the saddle and allowed him to ease into the wire for the final 16th of a mile. I think that was another solid effort for a horse that has improved his speed figure since stretching out in distance. And he does, to me, feel like a horse among all of these in the Santa Anita Derby field that is really going to appreciate the mile and 1/8 distance. He's bred to go longer by constitution out of that Belmont winning sire, Union Rags, who is his dam sire. And he's getting a rider switch back to Hector Berrios, who rode him well in the second start of his career. And he's going out for trainer John Sheriffs, who has that reputation for bringing horses along more slowly than others that are listed trainers in the Santa Anita Derby. So I do think McVey is one that could take a step forward in this final round Kentucky Derby prep. And then the number 8 is EJW The Cup. He is looking for his 3rd victory in a row, broke his maiden 2-back, then went to Turf Paradise to win a stakes race there as the 1-9 favorite. He's just stepping way up in class because he wasn't beating a field of this quality when he won that maiden optional claimer 2-back. And that field he beat at Turf Paradise just does not nearly measure up to this one from a quality standpoint. So he has that working against him. And also he's one that wants to be forwardly placed in a race that is projected to feature a fast pace with plenty of other pace rivals that have already shown speed against tougher competition. So EJW The Cup just has a lot working against him in the Santa Anita Derby. Well, I'll throw my picks for this race. And while I respect the 2 morning line favorites, Stronghold and Imagination, not really interested in taking a short price on either one of them. And I was most interested in 2 horses that are listed at 5-1 in the morning line. The number 2, Talo, is one of them, but I also put the number 7, McVey, on top. He's still a maiden coming into this race, as I said, but I thought he ran well, improving with distance in his last 2 starts and was compromised by that trip last time in the San Felipe. Feels like one that can take another step forward, going the mile and 1/8, given the physical attributes and the pedigree that I see for him. So McVey is the top pick in the Santa Anita Derby on Saturday at Santa Anita. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.